This is Viterbi Voices.
Coming to you from the University of Southern California, Viterbi School of Engineering.
We're here to give you the inside scoop on research, classes, student life, and so much more.
All of these shared by students, faculty, alumni, and other members of the USC community.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Viterbi Voices. As usual, I am one of your hosts. My name is Paul Ledesma, Executive Director of Undergraduate Admission. And a little bit different today, we don't have Maya with us today, but instead what we have is the entire Viterbi School admission staff here to talk about a very important time of year, which is the beginning of the application season or app season. And so as we're going to talk about the launch of the Common App that happened earlier this week, we're going to talk about the application as a whole, the ins and outs, the deadlines, what it means to apply, how to apply, some advice we have for you on how to apply, and some other special questions that we know we commonly get. This is going to be a good kind of overview, a good primer on how to apply for fall 2024 as either a first year or a transfer student. And without further ado, I want to introduce the rest of our guests here today. I'm not going to introduce them. They can introduce themselves. So Becky, why don't you kick it off?
Thanks, Paul. Hello, world. My name is Becky. I'm the director of undergraduate admission. Excited to be on today. I know this is a really stressful time for students, and I can't believe that we're already getting into the new application season. I feel like the last one just ended, but we are getting excited to meet with new students for the fall 2024 application season. So thanks for having me on.
I didn't mean to laugh at your enthusiasm. I don't know whether it's real or not. So, but I appreciate the enthusiasm nonetheless.
What are you talking about? I'm always like this. Always.
Angie.
Hello, I'm Angie. I'm the associate director. Excited, yes. But
doesn't seem as much as Becky. I'm going to say we're on a scale of Becky, 0 to Becky. You're nowhere near Becky. Come on.
0 to Becky. I'm on my own scale. So thank you for having me today.
Well, hello, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Stacey Badger. I'm the Senior Assistant Director in Viterbi, and I'm ready to talk about some application season stuff. So yeah, I'm excited.
What's up, everybody? My name is Lisa Rosas, and I'm the Assistant Director of Undergraduate Admission, equally as happy to be here as Becky.
I like how everybody got very self-conscious on how they determined and signified their level of happiness to be here. Sorry to make everybody very, very self-conscious on that. Okay, so it is August, and the Common App opened on August 1st for all students that are thinking about applying for admission for fall 2024 to USC and the Viterbi School of Engineering. A couple quick things from the outset before we kind of dive into it. It's important to understand that if you're applying to the Viterbi School of Engineering as an undergraduate, meaning you're applying as an incoming first-year student, which is a high school student that is applying as a first-year student to the Viterbi School of Engineering, or you're applying as a transfer student. The definition of a transfer student is someone who has already completed high school or its equivalent and then attended some sort of college afterward. We often get confusion about whether a student is a first-year student or a transfer applicant because we oftentimes have students that are taking community college classes or college coursework as part of their high school career or in the middle of their high school career, and they believe maybe they'll be applying as a transfer student. No, that's not the case. If you have not graduated high school, you are a first-year applicant. If you have graduated high school, you are a transfer applicant. If you have graduated high school and attended any type of college. So oftentimes from our transfer students, they may say, hey, I went to college for like a semester 10 years ago, and now I'm going back. Can I apply as a first year student? No, you need to apply as a transfer student because you've already kind of checked off those boxes, graduating high school or its equivalent and taken some sort of college level coursework at any point. So those are the definitions of first year and transfer applicants. And this is for our undergraduate program in the Viterbi School of Engineering. At the Viterbi School, we do not have a separate engineering application for admission. The Viterbi School is part of the overall university's admission process. We don't run a separate admission process in the Viterbi School Office of Admission ourselves. We are not making admission decisions. We are just part of that process and helping to review those applications and helping to understand our programs. So applying to the university, USC is a Common App school. And the only way to apply to USC is through the Common Application or the Common App. The website for that you'll probably hear us say a lot is commonapp.org. or you can go to our Viterbi Admission website, which is viterbiadmission.usc.edu. You can click on the apply button and learn more about all the things we're going to be talking about here today. The application opened on August 1st, so the whole Common App opened, and alongside of that, the USC questions inside the Common App opened as well. And they are not due for quite some time. And so if you're listening to this thinking you need to apply right now, you do not. And so if you are kind of trying to kick it into overgear and get your application in early, I'm going to tell you to pause and take your time. We'll get to some advice later down the road, but we do have deadlines. And I want Becky to kick us off to talk a little bit about when these are due and ultimately why getting it in early isn't necessarily a good thing, right? Everybody has their personal decisions, but let's talk about what these deadlines are.
Yeah, I think something that I always talk to students about is the application, went live on August 1st, but it is not a first come, first serve process. And so every year the university gets applications on August 1st, and you can imagine that they're not great applications. Those students filled out that application in one day. So definitely take your time, make sure the application is exactly how you want it to be. The short answer questions, the essays, they really reflect who you are as a person. Our first application deadline for first year applicants is not until November 1st. So that's about 3 months that you have to really sort of make your application just the way you want it. November 1st is our EA deadline, our early action deadline. That is not early decision. It is non-binding, non-restrictive, but it is our scholarship application deadline. So if you want to be reviewed for early action and you want to be considered for USC University scholarships, you do need to submit your application by November 1st. Our second application deadline for first year students is January 15th. So if you don't get it in by November 1st, you still have until January 15th to apply for first year admission. However, you will not be considered for scholarship. So there's nothing extra you need to do for the EA application deadline for that November 1st deadline. You just need to hit submit on the common application by November 1st. So those are our first year applicant deadlines. For transfer students, you have a little bit more time. The transfer application deadline is February 15th. There is only one of them. That February 15th deadline is also the scholarship deadline for transfer applicants. So two different deadlines for first year students, November 1st and January 15th, and then one for our transfer students, which is February 15th.
Awesome. And then you immediately triggered a first question that we get a lot of, which is early action. And so, Angie, could you describe for us, what does early action mean? Becky already talked about the idea of non-binding, non-committal, but how does that lay out in this kind of pantheon of options across universities where the word early comes in? You see early decision, you see restrictive early action, you see early admission, you see all these different things, and it freaks people out and it makes people scared. And some universities have different rules. And can you explain to them how ours is really no sweat and there's really no strategy or issues behind it?
Sure. I think Becky alluded to this a bit, but our early action is non-binding and non-restrictive. That basically means you can apply to any other school as long as they let you do the same. That's the biggest piece there. We let you apply to whoever you want as long as they allow you to do the same. I don't want to talk too much about early decision because I'm not familiar with it, but for those of you unfamiliar with the difference, early decision, you're typically only applying to one school, and if you're admitted, you have to go because it's a binding process. So early action for us, not too much to stress out. It does mean you're applying earlier than maybe some other schools. You're applying earlier than the regular decision pool. And the most important thing to know is that early action means different things for different schools. And for us, it's just about the merit scholarship process. That's really the only thing that it implicates for our student population, is that you are considered for the merit scholarship process through early action. If you apply early action, it doesn't mean that your chances of admission are better or that you are more interested in USC than someone applying for regular decision. It just means that you want to be considered for the merit scholarship process.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest way to describe it, is that if you want to be considered for merit-based scholarships, you get your application submitted as early action by the November 1st deadline. And it's important to note those are checkboxes inside of the application. You must select the early action process when you submit and then make sure that you actually hit submit by the November 1st deadline. You can't submit regular decision and submit by the deadline. You will not be considered for merit-based scholarships. Let's be really, really clear about that. There is no reason that anyone listening to this should not be applying early action. This is an important element to understand. We're not playing any games. You're not affecting any chances of admission, but it does open you up to the opportunities to be considered for one of our competitive merit-based scholarships. Our deadlines for review, all of this is on our website, so I'd encourage you to check this out a little bit further to us. But we will be admitting a small portion of students a little bit earlier, and those students will, and then from those, a portion of those students will be named scholarship finalists, and then scholarship finalists will go through another section, another kind of timeline after that, where we will review those applicants and award actual scholarships to our finalists. Some will not be getting scholarships, so it is highly competitive. We've often got a lot of questions on like, what are the chances? I mean, mathematically, we're talking about 1% to 2% of the total applicant pool are getting scholarships. This is a small process, but there's no reason that anyone should not at least throw their hat in the ring and be considered. Don't take yourself out of consideration. Don't count yourself out of our process. Get your application in now. You have months to figure this out. Get it in. And I remember last year talking to some students around this deadline saying, hey, don't forget to get your app in. They're like, I just need like a few more weeks to polish my essays. And I'm like, I don't think they're going to get much more polished. They're not going to get much more polished in this process. I don't think that's going to make that big of a deal. And by taking yourself out of the scholarship process, that doesn't make any sense. We're still a highly competitive institution, regardless of when you apply. You might as well throw your hat in the ring for scholarships. Get that in. That's an important element.
And I want to touch on something that you just said, but I don't know if students like actually heard it. So I want to kind of bring light to it. We had a number of applications last year where the students applied regular decision, but applied before the November 1st deadline. And I just, again, want to make it very clear to students that even if you apply October 15th, if you check regular decision, we will not review your application for scholarships and you will not be considered for that process. We will wait until after January 15th to review your application. So I think it's really important that you have to click early action and apply by November 1st if you want to be considered for those scholarships. And then, as Paul said, a small number of students are admitted early action, and then the rest of the students are deferred to regular decision. So there's no decisions of deny are being made at this point. Every student who is not that small portion that's admitted early action, you're all being deferred to regular decision and considered again for admission to USC and to Viterbi.
Very cool. Thank you. And then let's also highlight the transfer deadlines and making sure that while we've said this, but specifically, if you are considering applying as a transfer student, don't worry at all about the words early action. Don't worry at all about November. Don't even worry about January. Don't even start thinking about applying until you get through your fall term at your current institution. Once you have your fall grades from your fall semester of college at wherever you are, if you're at a community college, you're at another four-year institution, once you've completed that, we recommend looking at the application over the winter break, completing the application before you go back for your winter quarter or your spring semester, and get that application in by February 15th. Angie, is that a good reference point to transfer students? Is there anything else we should know about the transfer application and talk about the transfer application, that any slight differences? There are a few there that I want to highlight.
Yeah, there are a few. I think we'll mention them throughout, related to like requirements with respect to the application specifically. I don't know if do we want to talk about like timeline, go that far, or just keep it to the current?
No, just keep it to the application. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Wait, what was that?
No, just keep it to the application. Like,
Okay,
you mean
okay,
like
good.
big decisions and stuff like that? No.
Yeah. No, we'll keep that out for now. But yeah, just to reemphasize what Paul said, don't send your transcripts in before you submit your application either.
That was big confusion this past year. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It will get lost because if you send a transcript and you haven't applied, there's nowhere for us to connect your transcript to. It's just kind of going to be floating in the ether of college admission documents. So again, don't rush to apply. Wait till your fall semester or quarter is done because we need those grades anyway. Then work on your application in the winter, submit by February 15, then send your college transcripts. Don't send them before we have your application.
That's a really, really important hot tip. There were a lot of students that submitted transcripts early, then waited to apply. It was very confusing. They had to do it again. Don't do that. Yeah, just apply first, then fill it in. I think so many people, this is probably good advice for everybody. applying either first year or transfer. So many people, for some reason, think there's so much pressure on hitting that button submit as if there's never anything that can ever happen again. And they don't realize that updates to information can happen all the time. Updated transcripts, updated information, something changes in your life. So hitting submit is not the end of the entire experience. Keep in mind that things get added and changed. And sometimes we even ask for further information as we get into our application file review. So that's an important element to understand. All right. Now, we've started talking about this, but I want to kind of give a walkthrough. And Stacey, if you wouldn't mind kind of visually helping people walk through the Common App, and not necessarily detailed, like, pixel counts and stuff like that, but can you go through and tell people, like, okay, so they're gonna go into Common App. What do they got to do, right? What they got to do to create their file? How do they do add USC? What are those elements, and what do they need to click on? What are the first steps they need to take?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, not to be into too much detail, but so you wake up, right? And you go about your day.
Turn
that's how
on your
starts.
computer.
Right. But no, in reality, of course,
www.
yeah, commonapp.org. So you're going to log in, of course, to your Common App, and it's going to give you an option to select your schools. And so with that, you're going to pick the University of Southern California. And like we've mentioned before, too, we are not a separate application or anything like that when it comes to applying to engineering or computer science. We are all part of the University of Southern California. So you're going to put all of that in. What I always recommend doing next is putting in your major, because in the Viterbi School of Engineering, we require that we are your first choice major. So you're going to see a list of all of the majors that USC has to offer. All of the ones that are the Viterbi School will have the letters VSE, for Viterbi School of Engineering, in front of it. And you can pick any of those as your first choice major. So whether it's computer science, whether it's mechanical engineering or environmental engineering, civil engineering, any of these different majors, put that as your first choice. We cannot read your application if you do not put us as your first choice. If you're putting something else as your first choice and putting us as your second choice, we will not be able to even look at your application. So make sure you put us as that first choice. So that's one of the things you'll want to do. When you put us as your first choice, you're going to notice 2 questions will auto-populate when it comes to the short answers. I promise these are not scary questions, but you're going to have, of course, the writing portion that is part of the Common App. You're going to have your essay. You get to pick your prompt, and that is something that all of the colleges that you are applying to through the Common App will see. So you don't want to make that one necessarily based on USC and your interests of USC if you are also applying to other schools within the Common App as well. So put us as your first choice major. You're going to have the essay that is for all of the schools. And then you get into those supplemental questions. And the supplemental questions, those are USC questions. And those are ones that we will absolutely be reading. And we're very excited to read as well. So you're going to have the general sort of USC questions. And then you're going to have specifically the engineering, computer science-based questions. And so we have 2 of those. And those are going to be based on sort of what your contributions could possibly be to the Viterbi School of Engineering. And then we're going to ask you to do a little bit of homework in your second question, which is looking at the grand challenges and sort of picking out the grand challenges of what those mean to you. We want you to do reflection and write a little bit on that. These short answer questions are just 250 words. They are not full essays or anything like that. So don't worry. But definitely give us your full answers on that too. I also recommend, again, so the application is due November 1st. On Halloween, on October 31st, Halloween of your senior year, don't put engineering as just your first choice then, because then these 2 questions will pop up and you'll be like, wait a second, I have more questions I have to fill out. So make sure you put us as your first choice major really as soon as you get into the Common App, because you don't want to be surprised later, really, at more writing or more prompts or anything like that. But those are sort of the pieces that you'll be filling out the most. You're going to, of course, do your name, your address, all that stuff. I always recommend doing that in August when you open up the application, because it feels less daunting later on when you go in to add your writing. A chunk of it's already done because you know your address, you know your name, you know that information. So put that in sooner rather than later, and then give yourself a little bit of time for the writing to get that how you want it. And again, if you want to enjoy the Halloween of your senior year, Maybe you want to get stuff in a little earlier. Maybe you want to wait till November, all of those different things. So there's definitely options for you in there. But time things out the best you can. When it comes to submitting the application on November 1st, all of those writing components and all of those pieces in there, you'll want to submit by November 1st. Things like your letters of recommendation and your transcripts, those can come in after November 1st, but those are really the key components. And USC, we're a fun place here. We're a fun bunch. So there are some questions in your application that are maybe, we think are fun. And those are called the quick takes or the really short answers. So there's a kind of a place in the application to break things up. Of course, you're going to have the writing sections that I mentioned. And then we're just trying to get to know you in other ways. And we're going to ask you questions like, what's your favorite snack? What's the last TV show you binge watched? What's your theme song and all these different things. I promise those are not trick questions. Those are really just to get to know you a little bit better. It breaks up the application for you. It breaks up the application for us when we're reading. But those are the fun questions on there too, and something that we always look forward to reading as well. So those are sort of the main components of the application. You're going to put us as your first choice major. Obviously, why would you put anything else as your first choice major, right? You're going to do your writing portions. You're going to do your quick takes and your letters of recommendation and your transcripts. Those will come into follow. But November 1st is when you'll want to get everything in there.
Yeah, I think what's important to understand is that a complete application is the Common Application questions and the USC questions. The USC questions are built into the Common App. And so those are important. Common App questions, as Stacy said, are the ones that are seen by every university that you're applying to through the Common Application. And then the USC specific questions are the ones that are coming to USC. What was embedded into Stacy's talking points there, I want to make sure everyone's clear on. We are reading the entire thing. Every one of these questions, Common App questions, USC questions, and the engineering kind of supplement questions that are built into the USC questions, that's kind of like a book to us. And oftentimes people think, oh, they're only reading this one, they're only reading that one, or which one's more important. Every single part of this application is important. Every single thing that you put down is a part of your story, and we don't want to miss any part of it. So don't assume that we are just reading certain parts of this. That's an important element. Sometimes people believe like, oh, the engineering school only cares about the engineering questions. No, that is not true at all. We're reading everything, and the engineering questions are such a small part of the application. This gets a little bit into, what we're looking for and how we review this, but in short, what we are looking for our students is not one particular thing. And there's not one particular type of student that I think is more successful at the Viterbi School, but there is minimum academic prep. And that means that you need to be taking the appropriate courses. Are you taking rigorous courses at your high school? Are you getting A's and B's, more A's than B's? Then you're on the right track. With preparation for engineering, are you taking the most rigorous courses of math and science in your high school? Or are you getting A's and B's and more A's than B's? And that's also appropriate for the engineering school. And then specifically calculus, we do need to see exposure and success in calculus before you graduate, because that is a key determining factor in how well prepared you are for an engineering curriculum that is built upon calculus. There's so many different levels of calculus available at every single school. Everybody has something different: calc, honors calc, AP calc AB, AP calc BC, IB HLAA. Whatever it's going to be, there's so many out there. It doesn't matter which one. Whatever is the most appropriate rigorous track at your high school, that's what's so important. Don't worry what's happening at another school. Don't worry about what's happening at your cousin's school across town or your sister's school from 6 years ago. What we want to know is what's available to you at your school, and are you engaged in the highest level of rigor at your school? So we want to see calculus. And if you've taken calculus earlier, then we want to see you keep moving up the calculus ladder if it's available at your school. I think that's what's most important. Outside of that, a lot of people have done those things. And so what we want to do is get to know your story. That story is a combination of all the answers to all these questions. My advice to you is do not strategize that process. Don't think we're looking for any particular type of student. Tell your story and all of the experiences and all the challenges that you've had, all the successes that you've had. We want to know who you are and what you've done and how you've done it in the context of the things that you've done. And as a result of that, we're trying to project forward to how we're going to build a really interesting and unique community where the sum is greater than where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. This is essentially what we're trying to do here, and bringing different types of students with different types of backgrounds together to create teams where we can create the best possible solutions for incredibly complex problems facing humanity. That's our overall mission. That's our overall goal. And so you need to tell us about your life and your background. Do not try to manage your narrative around what's some sort of element that you think we're looking for. It won't work. It's not very helpful. To be quite honest with you, it gets away from that authentic voice that we are looking for. So the application, the entire thing is important. Every single element is important. We read it cover to cover like a book. Please keep that in mind. And, making sure that you are not, make sure you're writing things well, I think is the most important thing to understand too. Like we don't know you, so we're trying to understand you. So our best advice is usually keep it authentic and make sure that it's well written. And that doesn't mean it needs to be an amazing English essay that uses all sorts of imagery and all sorts of narrative devices. We're just trying to get to know you. So clearly and well written, I think, is the important part. Yeah.
Paul, if I could add just about transfer students in this context.
Yeah,
too.
thank you. Yeah.
So a lot of what Paul just mentioned is, well, the first part of what he mentioned is very specific to first year applicants.
Yes.
If you're a transfer applicant, we don't just expect Calc 1 from you. We actually require at least Calculus 2, and we have very specific recommendations by major, and we have other requirements like lab science, writing, very specific academic requirements. So again, if you're a transfer applicant, you should check out our transfer website, viterbiadmission.usc.edu/transfer, to see those course plans by major. The transfer process is mostly academic. Do you meet the minimum requirements? Are you doing well? Are you going beyond the minimum requirements if you have room in your schedule? But the latter half of what Paul was mentioning about your story and your fit, that is all applicable to transfer applicants as well. Yes, we need to see a calculus grade. We need to see physics for some students, but we actually receive quite a number of applications for transfers as well. And a bit of those will meet the minimum requirements more than we can admit. So beyond just meeting minimum requirements, we care as well for the transfer application or the transfer applicant pool about fit, about your story, why you want to pursue engineering, kind of those similar aspects. But let's just say that a bad grade in calculus is not going to, a good essay will not make up for a bad grade in calculus.
Yes.
For the
Yes.
transfer process. So there's that.
Also true of the first year process.
Yeah, that's true. So the whole all the things that we talk about regarding fit and being authentic and your story and all this stuff is for both first year and transfer students. Because the reality is we get more applications than we could admit for both first year and transfer students. And we want to make sure that the students we're admitting will be contributing to this community, not just in the academics, but outside as well.
Okay, so mechanics wise, Common App, list USC as a school. First thing you should do is go to the academic section and list the Viterbi School of Engineering as your first choice major. In order to do that, you do need to select a term, which is choosing fall 2024 and early action. That is important. If you're a transfer student, you select as a transfer applicant. There's kind of a different step as you go through that, but as a transfer applicant, you go through those appropriate steps. But you do need to list the Viterbi School as your first choice major on the application. Now, there are some special populations that I think are important to note, but I want to make sure that I'm giving you the appropriate resources there that you all need to do some extra reading. And it's a little harder to describe on a podcast, but if you are a homeschooled student, if you are an undocumented student, or if you are an international student, I encourage you to go to the admission office's website, which is admission.usc.edu. There are specific links relative to each of these individual populations about some extra things that you're going to need to consider, that you're going to need to submit, or that you should be aware of in the application process. So homeschooled students, undocumented students, and international students, you need to make sure that you check out the other important information on the admission website at USC, admission.usc.edu. We also link off to it off of our website, but there are some special steps that you want to consider as you go ahead through this process. Now, in all of this, I know that oftentimes students worry about applying and they worry about the affordability of college. And this is an important aspect and something that we should really kind of take into consideration. Oftentimes students tell me there's no way I can come to USC because I can't afford it. And so I want to make sure that we talk about financial aid and how that applies into this process. And first and foremost, and Lisa, maybe you can give us just a quick overview of what they need to do for applying to financial aid. But recognize that applying for financial aid has nothing to do with the application process. What do they need to do to apply for need-based financial aid?
Yeah, so like Paul mentioned, that's going to be a separate process. You're going to fill out your FAFSA first and foremost, and then the CSS profile. You're going to put down all the information requested on the application. And there are some situations like for students where they need to submit specific documentation. So just make sure you're filling out the application to the best of your ability. And then work with financial aid if you have any questions on the application process. They're really good about reaching out and supporting students throughout that. I don't know if you guys want to add anything more to that. I'm sure you do.
I just looked up the deadlines because no one had that, but because, just in case. So here are the deadlines. First year students, if you apply early action, these things, FAFSA and CSS, are due January 12th. And if you are a regular decision applicant, the deadline is February 7th for the financial aid stuff. And then transfer students, all your things are due March 4th.
Right. So important to understand, applying to USC, the application process is its own process. When that is finished, then move on and apply for financial aid, which is completing the free application for federal student aid, often known as the FAFSA, and the CSS profile, which is the College Scholarship Service profile available from collegeboard.com. Those two things are required for need-based financial aid. It's important to understand that our admission process is a need-blind admission process. And what that means is that we, as admission people and the rest of the university admission staff, don't have any insight into this documentation. It is a separate process. We have no understanding of a family's ability to pay, which is a good thing. We're not just only admitting people that we think can afford it, because our financial aid office commits to awarding 100% of a student's USC determined need. In short, if the cost of attendance at USC is roughly $90,000 and a family can afford only to pay $25,000 of that, I just picked a number that I have to do math on now.
Go with 30. They can afford
Let's go with 30. Thank you. So let's say USC. That's why we shouldn't have recorded.
It's hard.
Yeah, that's why we shouldn't have recorded today. If USC, if the cost of attendance is $90,000 and a family can, based on this documentation, is determined to afford $30,000 per year, then USC will award $60,000 in need-based financial aid, and that is awarded through a need-based grant, which is free money that you never have to pay back. That's the grand majority of that money. A small portion of money with loan, which is money that you need to pay back at some sort, and then a work-study program, which is money that you go and you get a job and you get paid through. That is different than merit-based scholarships. Merit-based scholarships are part of our admission process and a competitive process of which we're awarding out through that early action deadline. Full tuition, half tuition, quarter tuition, and a number of other smaller scholarships down the road. So I know we're getting a lot into the weeds here, but I hope we're covering a lot of different elements as students have questions about it. If someone is worried at all about financial aid and whether they're eligible, I mean, my general advice is to any family who has never gone through the financial aid process, if this is the oldest child and you're going through this for the first time, I always recommend to at least go through the need-based financial aid process at least once, just to see what happens. And every university is different. Every university has different policies on how they award out need-based financial aid. There are kind of standards for the federal documents, but then there is discretion given at certain elements with the CSS profile. So just keep that in mind that you're going to, your miles may vary on each one of these different institutions, but it's always a good opportunity to apply, because at worst, it can open up some other creative financing options for each family as it goes through that. So please do that. If you're at all curious, every university is required to maintain what's called a net price calculator, which will give you a rough sense of a family's ability to receive certain financial aid. The USC's is at usc.edu/NPC, NPC for net price calculator. If you just Google USC net price calculator, you can check that out. There's one for first year students and also one for transfer students. Check that out as you go. And if you're at all worried that if the cost of applying is a barrier to you and your family on whether you can apply or not, we do have fee waivers available. And so as you go through the Common App, you can check those boxes and submit for those fee waivers. We do not want to make the cost of applying or the cost of attendance any type of a barrier to a student considering USC for their future college studies. Now, in all that, the Common App, there's the Common App questions, there's the USC questions, and then there's other documents, transcripts, and we also have a teacher counselor report. Becky, can you talk about what a teacher counselor report is and how no one really knows what it is, but they're looking to submit letters of recommendation, and then they want to submit 10 letters of recommendation? What can we talk about with teacher counselor report and letters of recommendation?
Yeah, sure. So USC does not require any letters of recommendation. You do not need to submit any to have a complete application. So keep that in mind.
I feel like we need to pause and say it again because no one knows this. Like everyone's like, oh my God, I got to get a letter of recommendation in.
We do not require a single letter of recommendation to complete your application at USC.
There you go.
There is something called a teacher counselor report. So a teacher or counselor at your high school must submit a report. And it's really just a form. Sometimes they write a little paragraph, but it's not a letter of recommendation. It's just a form that a counselor needs to submit. I think it just confirms you will be graduating.
Oftentimes counselors or teachers will submit a letter, but that's not necessarily all the time. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's really just a form that they need to fill out and submit. Now, I know some of you really want to submit letters of recommendation, or you will have letters of recommendation for other universities that do require them, and you may submit them. But we do, or at least I personally, have a limit to the number that maybe you should submit. I would say no more than 3. As Paul mentioned, some students submit 10.
Not a good idea.
You get what?
Not a good idea.
No, because like he said, we read your application like a book. So if you submit 10 letters of rec, we must read 10 letters of rec. And at about rec number 5, they all read the same. You're wonderful. You're great. Yay. So fabulous. And so honestly, and then we also get the question a lot, if I submit a letter of rec, should it come from a math or a science teacher? And that's really not necessary. I think if you are going to submit a letter of recommendation, have it come from someone who knows you best. If you walked into calculus, took a test, left, got an A, never really spoke to your teacher outside of class, they don't know you very well. We want to get to know you, not just through the essays and the short answer questions that you submit, but also if you are going to submit any letters of rec, we want to get to know you. And so sometimes it's maybe a class that you struggled in where the teacher knows you the best because you were at office hours and you got you started out the semester with a C and ended with an A because of all the hard work you put through, or a professor or a teacher who was, the faculty advisor for a student organization, someone who you know really well, I think is important. We have gotten letters of recommendation from parents for their children in the past, and I would not recommend that. A letter of rec from mom. But so if you are going to submit any, I would say 1 to 2 max, and make sure it's from someone who knows you really, really well. But letters of recommendation are not required for freshmen or for first year applicants, and they are not required for transfer applicants as well. So you don't need to submit any ever, and your application will still be considered complete.
Yeah. Don't feel that pressure. Don't worry about that so much, I think is the biggest deal. If it adds something and you have that relationship that Becky talked about, then that's something to maybe consider. But to go the other direction, we often get questions like, oh, so should I get letters of recommendation from my math or science teachers? And I will commonly say this: those are the ones that write the worst letters of recommendation. We're not looking for anyone to wax poetic on your ability to do engineering work. We have grades and data that helps us understand that. Now, if you have great relationships, as Becky mentioned, then yeah, go after it. But don't go after a math or science teacher just because you think that's what we're looking for. We're not. We want to understand relationships, how you've impacted your communities, your areas. That's the overall goal of the application. And if there's other information that can help shed some light on that, typically your counselor can do that, but other teachers that you may have, or maybe a boss or a coach or something else, they can do those things. It's not necessarily a math teacher, unless that's where all of your impact and your engagement has been.
Sorry, we just need to clarify something. A letter of recommendation is required for first year applicants. It's on the admission website. It says 1 letter is required from either your school counselor or a teacher from your school.
So this is where it gets confusing. I'm glad you brought this up. That is the teacher counselor report. That is the teacher council report. Nothing else is needed beyond that. So thank you for bringing that up. That is the teacher council report that is built into the common application. Nothing extra is required beyond that. And everybody has different feelings on whether they like more, they like less. Honestly, it's all about whether it's telling a complete story. And I think that's the important part. Don't be seeking out extra letters. The teacher council report is what we require. And I think it's just the idea of a tomato naming of what it's called, but it is the teacher council report inside of common application. That is what is required. But thank you for bringing that up, because people will look at our website or the USC website. They'll look at different areas. They'll say, I've got to go get this. And I think that's an addition, and it's not.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. And that's exactly why we need to have these conversations, because it can get confusing depending on how you read and what you read and how you go through that. So just keep in mind what's inside there is what we actually need. Now, all of these things that we've talked about, we have decades of experience on this team, in addition to, just doing this for quite some time. We all read different things. We all see good applications. We all see bad applications. In general, what are your all's pieces of advice to students as they approach this application? What are the things that will either help them, or what are some things they definitely should stay away from as they start approaching the application?
Stay away from Chat GPT.
I always say to the more you try to finesse the system, there are students who will think that certain majors are easier to be admitted to than others, or different things like that. For us, all of our majors are equally as competitive. So genuinely apply to where you want to start taking engineering classes or computer science classes, because that also makes for the best engineering application, because you actually can authentically be yourself. When you're trying to finesse the system by trying to pick something that you think is easier to be admitted to, or something that, is, again, trying to work the system, it usually makes for not a very good application, because you're almost lying to us of I really want to do this, and you really don't. And it doesn't make for a strong of an application. So apply to where you actually want to start doing, taking classes and in those things in that way. And I always tell students too, when it comes to the writing, avoid, I don't need to read a poem. They want to be creative, and they're they put poems or puzzles or sometimes in their writing, and it actually makes it more difficult to read sometimes when you do that. So
yeah, it's rare that it's successful. It's rare that it's successful.
Right. And I know you want to be creative, and I know you want to stand out in your application, but having a really strong, well-written application is better than confusing me as I'm trying to read it.
Yeah. And I'm going to kind of go off of what Stacy was saying. Whenever students ask me for advice, we can't really give you advice on what to write about, because we want to get to know you. And I think all of our advice kind of boils down to one thing, and that's trying to strategize the application. Don't strategize what major you apply to. Don't strategize what you write about in your essay. Don't write your essays and short answer questions the way you think we want you to write them. Don't write them the way you think, or don't write them the way your parents think we want you to write them. Don't write them the way your English teacher thinks we want you to write them. We want to learn about you, and we want to get to know you. And as Paul mentioned earlier, we're trying to bring in the best well-rounded class of students that can work together from different backgrounds, that can challenge each other. And so there's not one thing we're looking for. We're looking for all different things. And there's 5 of us reading applications, and we're all making different decisions, and we're trying to bring in the best class that we can every year. And then one of the things, and Stacy kind of mentioned this, is when we're reading those essays, it's great to be creative, they're great to be funny. I mean, I've definitely read essays where I've laughed out loud because they were really funny. But a lot of times it's hard to pull off on, my computer screen when I'm trying to read this essay, because I don't know you. I don't know your sense of humor. I don't know inside jokes between you and your friends. And so sometimes humor can come off, kind of have the opposite effect, where I'm what is this kid talking about? What are we even going down this path for? And so it can, it can kind of put a pause. If we have to go back and reread to try and understand what you're talking about, that can, kind of put us in a state where it's hard to read your application. So we want to get to know you, and we want to get to know important aspects of your background and things you've been involved in. And humor can be good, but just make sure that if you put in funny snippets, that it's something that someone who doesn't know you can read and understand and maybe laugh at. Because there have been some creative essays where it was a complete and total turnoff because it just wasn't, it just didn't work for that student. And so it made you kind of rethink how you're going to review this application. So I think being authentic, having us get to know you, I think is really important. And then just being careful of how much creativeness you put in there, how much humor you put in there, and just make sure that, enough people read it that they can say whether it's coming off how you want it to come off when a perfect stranger is reading your application.
One thing that strikes me is that most of our advice is actually in response to the antithetical to someone else's advice. Like people get told you need to stand out, and standing out is I'm going to tell a joke. I'm going to write this in this really weird poetic pattern. I'm going to be odd and make a puzzle out of my writing. I mean, we've seen every version of this down the road. And that can, like, as everyone's mentioned, it just doesn't turn out the way you want it to be. It can be successful. Everybody can be successful in their own writings, but it's when it's authentic. Like when we have students that like know exactly what they're doing, like this is how this person writes all the time. This is their personality. This person is a poet. It works out really well. Hey, it can come across well. But more often than not, it ends up falling flat. So yeah, authenticity. Who are you? What do you do? How do we understand you? That's really what we're trying to get at. And some of these things can create roadblocks to us understanding you, or just confuse. And that's something that we don't want to do.
Yeah, if I can just add one more thing to what Becky said. I mean, I echo everything that you guys mentioned. You hit all the points in reading a really good application, but maybe have someone that knows you very well read your application, and then someone who doesn't. That helps a lot. And then talk to them and see if your personality shine through that application, because the best ones we've read are the ones we know their story. We have a really good feel for who they are.
Absolutely. Yeah, having that feedback is important. Having a good feedback of someone else to understand you and make sure that it's coming through. That's the good stuff that we really understand. I would also mention that in some situations, many of you that are high school students have been working on drafts of your college essay for the last year and a half in English classes, et cetera. And I just want you to think about something for a quick second. Is it still your writing? If it's gone through so many edits, is it still your writing? And when you have it polished to an nth degree, and then you go to the rest of the application fresh and it doesn't have that same level of edits, that difference in writing can sometimes be a little odd. Who is the real person here? Who is writing? So making sure that we're understanding your voice as you go through the application. You don't want us to have questions as you go through. The other thing I did want, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. You want your essays and short answer questions, any sort of paragraph you put together to be, the correct grammar and have all your words spelled right, and double check everything, that when you're talking about how much you want to go to USC, you don't put the wrong university's name in there. Like you want everything to, grammatically correct. But like Paul was saying, the more and more your essays get reviewed by English teachers and counselors and parents and your neighbor and your, dad's boss or whatever, it starts to read like a 40-year-old person wrote it. And we know that you are 17. We don't expect you to be these great, literary writers. So we're expecting an essay written by a 17, 18-year-old. So just keep that in mind. We want it to be in your voice, not your neighbor's boss's voice.
I feel like we talked about this somewhere on the road this last year, but when we run into a word that we don't understand, we kind of wonder how you understand the word. Like if you went really deep on the thesaurus to find a certain word, and we have to pause and it's that, again, none of these things are like, oh my God, this is going to the no pile. This isn't happening. It's just much more about like, help us understand you, be clear, be well written. And it doesn't need to be this, amazing scholarly work of English. So there's differences between these things. The other thing is that Becky mentioned there's 5 of us reading, but we're not the only 5. There are dozens and dozens of people across the university. And I think that's what's important, is that you're not just writing to us, you're writing to a number of different people at the university. The Office of Admission has a number of different people that are reading applications, and we're jumping in there wherever we possibly can and helping to read and add our opinions and context and viewpoints into the application review process, because there's never one person that's making a decision. And we are not the ones making that decision. The Office of Admissions is making that decision. We are just helping to provide our input to guide that decision as we build out our class. So just keep that in mind, that it's not like writing to us, and you shouldn't be directly addressing us necessarily. You're addressing a lot of different people at the university who are bringing in lots of different viewpoints into this. And that would be one of my pieces of advice, is that, we're also not expecting you to have this like deep dive knowledge into the Viterbi school. And oftentimes I think people fake that by just Googling things randomly on our site, or diving deep into a professor's website and copying and pasting some information about how you've always wanted to work with this one professor. I just don't do that unless it's actually something you wanted to do. Of course, it's good to know about the school. Of course, it's good to know about our programs and why you might be interested in those things. But it often can fall flat if it's something that's so specific and so detailed that I know you just kind of dug into something really, really detailed to find that. I want it to be realistic. I want it to be understood that it is yours. So just keep that in mind. This also leads to the idea of demonstrated interest. A lot of different universities out there practice demonstrated interest in different ways. In short, we don't. I want to make sure that's really clear. We do not practice demonstrated interest. And what that means to me is that we're not keeping track of how much we think you like us. We're not keeping track of how many emails you send us or how many programs you visit or anything like that. We just want you to apply if you're interested. I often make the joke, I consider if you have applied, if you submitted an application, I've considered that you have demonstrated interest in our programs by applying. That's it. So don't think you need to bend over backwards to believe that we need to know that we're your favorite or your first choice. I don't need to know that. I mean, if we are, and that's great to you, hey, great, but it's not like something that you need to kind of inject into your narrative if it's not true. That's not something that we're looking for. There's so many people that came to USC who were never planning on coming to USC. They just discovered us as they went through this process and learned more about us in that senior year and discovered that this is the right place for them. And I think that's one of my favorite things about our program. So keep in mind, this is a natural process. Trust the process. Don't try to strategize it. Be authentic. We're just trying to find some really, really great students to come here. And nothing you do in your application will increase your chances of admission. There's a lot of ways to decrease it. Not taking the right classes, not writing it well, doing all those other elements. There's things that can move it away, but there's nothing that's like a secret combination of words that's going to be like, oh, they said the magic words. Now that's what's going to get us in here. So just keep that in mind as you go through this process. We're just trying to get to know you. And given our highly selective nature, the chances are incredibly slim. And we don't know what our chances of admission are for the next coming year, but it's pretty likely guaranteed to be under 10%. It's been under 10% last year and the year before that. So just keep in mind it's competitive. Do your best. Help us get to know you. That's really the main point that we want to understand and get in there. We often get requests, hey, can you review my application before I submit it? No, because we're also going to be part of that review process. So that seems rather unfair in either direction. If I tell you it's good and then you don't get admitted, that's not fair. If I tell you it's bad and it was maybe fine, let's not do that. So we're not going to also do that type of work ahead of time. So just get that in and make sure we can understand it. Is there anything else, y'all, that we should talk about when it comes to the application, navigating the applications, advice on the application, things moving forward from this point?
Well, something just came to my mind when you said, a student might have never thought about applying to USC and then they just submit their application. So they don't have all this demonstrated interest that we're not looking for anyways.
Yeah.
But I also kind of want to talk or bring up, if you guys want to talk about this idea of a student who'd never thought about engineering before. Because it reminded me of some students who their senior year started taking AP computer science and they had not had any engineering or computer science before, and then decided they loved their AP computer science class in October of their senior year of high school, applied to computer science, majored in computer science, graduated in computer science, and now has a job in that field. And so for students out there who are thinking, maybe I want to do engineering or computer science, but I'm not sure, engineering or computer science is probably what you want to apply to at USC. And this kind of goes into strategizing the application process. I know sometimes there's this view that students applying to USC, Viterbi, or just engineering schools in general have been coding since they were 3. And I think a lot of times it's the exact opposite. It's students who haven't really found engineering until high school and then kind of fall in love with it and apply. So if you don't have this extended background in engineering and computer science, this could still be the right field for you. And so thinking about that. And so sometimes we get students who do not apply to USC first choice engineering because they think they won't qualify for admission to Viterbi. And then they get admitted to USC and then they try to transfer into Viterbi. And I think the best route to go is to apply first choice to engineering, because even if you're not admitted to engineering as your first choice major, the university will consider you for your second choice major. So no matter what you apply first choice major, you can still be admitted to USC. So don't strategize. I know we said don't strategize your engineering major and what might be easier or harder, but also don't strategize not applying to engineering. I don't know if that's the right, right words to use, but don't take yourself out of the running. Don't take yourself out of the running. Apply to engineering. If you're thinking about it, fill out the application. Your short answers will be authentic. And then if for some reason you're not admitted to engineering, you could be considered for your second choice. So you're not taking yourself out of the opportunity of being admitted to USC in general. Just something to think about.
That's great. That's really great. Anything else, y'all? Any other frequently asked questions we get about the application? Worries, concerns, misunderstood processes, things that other engineering schools do that we don't?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things that are different between us and other schools, but I would tell students just go to the website. We keep our website very up to date. And so all the most up to date information is on there. So viterbiadmission.usc.edu. It'll have links off to financial aid. It'll have links off to the, sort of central USC admission office for information for international students and undocumented students. So just go to our website, read through it. There's a lot of information, and we try to keep it as up to date as possible.
And I'll also just add, too, if you're interested in hearing more about student experiences and sort of what life is like as an engineering student, we do have a lot of current students that have, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you know about all of our students that are engineering students, ideally. So there's a lot of episodes here where you can listen to and see what life is like as an engineering student. But we're also going, we're in August right now, but as we go closer into August and into September and through the rest of the fall, we're going to have different events with some of our current students as well. So I highly recommend taking a look at those and attending. A lot of them will be virtual. They'll be virtual, so you'll be able to attend those from the comfort of your own home. And it's another way of kind of looking at the university and looking at life as an engineering student too, to see if this is somewhere that you really want to apply. And that's cool too.
In addition to that, we have a number of different events going on year round. And if you would like to come visit campus, our Visit Viterbi experiences are running on most Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We also will be going around the country in the coming months and around the world. And so if you're not able to make it to campus, we're likely coming to a city near you that we can come visit with you and learn more about the university as a whole, but also the Viterbi School of Engineering. And we'll likely be launching some other virtual events, as Stacey alluded to, but some other things that we might be putting together in the coming days, weeks, and months. And so there's a lot to learn about with the school. And so if you're not too sure, you want to learn more about our programs, we'd love to put these things on. You can go to our website where we have all of our events at viterbi.link/events. That's viterbi.link/events. That's where you can see opportunities to check our calendar for registration for on-campus events, off-campus events, virtual events. There's so many things happening. We do a lot of different things online and in person throughout the fall, basically September, October, before that November 1st deadline. So you can get all the information you need in order to determine whether this is the institution you want to add to your application list. I know that when you are a rising senior in high school, there's a lot of stuff on your mind, and the application process is challenging and stressful, and trying to decide all the differences between these different universities and what you're going to do. If you're at all considering USC and the Viterbi School, we'd love to see you apply. If you have any other questions, you can always feel free to reach out to us on email, vadmit@usc.edu. If you'd like to talk about stuff, give us a call at 213-600-9919. I will recommend, as all of the rest of our colleagues have mentioned here, go to our website, because a lot of the answers are there, viterbiadmission.usc.edu, with lots of information. And we'll be regularly updating that website as we go throughout the year with new, fresh things that's hopefully helpful to you. So with that, thank you so much to my colleagues here in the Viterbi School to talk about the admission process. And hopefully if you come to one of these events, you're going to meet one of us and learn more about it. So much stuff between now and that application. Best of luck to you. Start working on it. Take time. It's an iterative process. and do not miss that deadline. Make sure you get it in a couple days before just to kind of save yourself. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.